Yeah, it's really great to be here with everyone. It always feels, for me at least, like this gathering on Monday night we've been doing for a long time, maybe getting close to 25 years now. Yeah, probably 25 years. A 5-year or so curriculum of the Buddhist teachings, a little bit more of a formal or systematic look at how the Buddha articulated his own awakening process so that the work we have to do for ourselves is supported. Right? That's the point. How can we, teachings that were offered 2,600 years ago in a different time, different culture, how can we hear them together, digest them, so that our life is supported, our practice is supported, wisdom deepens, freedom increases. And so for the next 6 weeks, we'll be looking at the Buddhist teachings on impermanence, or the inconstant, ephemeral, unreliable, insubstantial nature of all phenomena, all conditioned phenomena. And of course, we're not going to spend the next 6 weeks looking for impermanence. We're going to spend the next 6 weeks being interested in this, the moment, present moment, and let it reveal itself as being impermanent, changing, not fixed, no nouns, no somethings, right? Everything is an unfolding, changing process. And the Buddhist studies classes are different than some of the other programs at the center. We're asking people to make a commitment when you can be here, to be here online, on Zoom, or in person. Now, you might have a family obligation or a work obligation, and that's totally okay to miss, and that's why we record. Everything immediately goes up on our YouTube channel, so you can always watch again or catch it later if you had some obligation on Monday night and you couldn't be here live with the group. But even though, over the years, the Buddhist studies class has gotten bigger with people, in person and online, and some people not even coming on Mondays because they can't, but picking it up later. It's still, we want to maintain that sense of we're doing this together. And one of the ways we do that is every other week we have small groups for 15 or 20 minutes. And it's not an optional part of the program, the class. So the idea is that you're going to, take your turn sharing what you've been learning, sharing the confusion you have, whether it's from your own practice or from the study or some combination of that. And it's meant actually to be to support the integrity of our meditation practice and our study, because in a way we're responsible to each other to share what we've been learning. It's always okay to pass, but just participating in the small group every other week is part of the class. And then most of you know this, but if you're new to the Buddhist studies, there is a prerequisite, I guess you could call it. We just sort of made it up. But what we want are people who actually practice regularly. Right? It's for people who are interested in meditation and who are meditating, if not every day, almost every day. And so the criteria is that you've done some retreat practice, half-day retreat, day-long retreat, 3-month retreat, 9-day retreats. So if you haven't, you could just reach out to me and make a commitment to do some retreats or talk to me about how you practice. I think that's most of the nuts and bolts. Both Joe and Ryan have volunteered to be program hosts for a couple of the nights. I still need a few slots. Someone to help me make sure the room gets set up and place gets closed down. And so if you're interested in doing that for the in-person group here, just see me right afterward and I'll sign you up. We have week 3 and week 4. We're looking for people, a person to be the program host. So let's go ahead and settle in. So people in the room have the chant sheet. And I thought instead of doing the refuge chant, we'd do the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. This is a very well-known chant teaching in our early Buddhist tradition. And the Buddha encouraged us to, if not every day, quite regularly, bring these 5 recollections to mind. So we're going to do it at the beginning for the next 6 weeks. So let's do it together. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. And we'll settle into meditation time now. The Buddha spoke, "O practitioners, maybe you can possess that possession, the possession that is permanent, stable, eternal, not of the nature to become other than it is, that would stay just like it is for an eternity. Do any of you see such a possession?" And the monks responded, "Indeed not, sir." "Exactly, practitioners, neither do I," said the Buddha. So settling in, notice how the heart is sensitive all the ways, sensitive to sights. Seeing is being known. Even when the eyes are closed, there's a visual experience being known. Notice the nature of this experience of seeing. Hearing is also being known. Each of the ways our heart is sensitive is a lot like a river in that it flows and continues to unfold. It's never becomes a thing. Sound is changing always. Seeing is changing. And notice now the big river of bodily sensations coming and going. The flowing on of sensation, even in those places that the sensations feel fixed, when we actually open, pay attention, we notice the unfolding of these sensations, the changing nature. And you may have to demonstrate to yourself over and over again the simple truth that all phenomena are in motion. They're moving and changing and unfolding. There's nothing whatsoever that's static. And this is true with seeing and hearing and sensations, and also with thought and emotion. And so for a while, at the beginning part of the set, each of us at our own pace, let's go through the 6 sense gates. So start with your 5 physical senses, and at least approximately a minute with each. So just being aware of seeing the visual field and notice how it is. Noticing the changing nature of the visual field, and then move on to another sense. And when you've done all 5 of the physical senses, then being aware of the sensitivity to mental activity, noticing the movement, the changing nature here. And then begin again with the 5 physical senses. So just rotating at least a minute with each one. And just confirming the changing nature of all phenomena that the heart is sensitive to. And remember, we're not trying to make anything happen. We're just interested in being close, being real, being honest with the way it is through each of the 6 sense gates. It takes some real skill to sustain this interest, one sense gate at a time. And basically we're inviting it to reveal, this sensitivity to reveal itself. So we're not trying to put a spin on anything or trying to make something true. What is the experience of seeing? What is the experience of hearing, smelling and tasting, maybe more subtle, but even the subtlety of smelling and tasting, noticing how it unfolds. And you might notice with some sincere practice that the sense of permanence arises because of the content of our thoughts about things. Basically, the story that we're telling ourselves about touch or about sound or about sight. But even those thoughts, those ideas are ephemeral. We just have to observe. We're observing the phenomena of body and mind. The body being the sensitivity through the five senses. And the mind, we're sensitive to mental activity in the way we are. And it's really these 6 sense gates that we call my life, this reality. So what is the nature of this experience we're having? And after you've gone through the 6 sense gates a few times, then let's work with the totality of our experience sitting here. And if the mind is full of doubt, then just observe the doubt. What is the nature of this experience of doubting? See if we can just allow it to reveal itself. Fixed or changing. So we're just contemplating the nature of the present moment, the sensitivity to body and mind. Does it need to be different than it is? We don't need a different experience than the one that's here now, moment by moment. This will do. And for lack of a better word, just noticing the thinness of the present moment. The very nature of this moment where the past is non-existent, it's gone, and the future isn't here yet. There's just this, the present moment, with no past behind it, and no future yet in front of it. And what is the nature of this present moment, actually, subjectively in our experience? Really, in no way do we have the past, and in no way do we have the future. We just have this. And noticing how thin, how fluid, unfixed the this is. And we're interested in having a peaceful, easeful way of being, way of relating to the nature of things, the nature of the moment. Not being in conflict, not needing it to be more than what it is, this moment. And of course, we're going to have a tendency to want to think about the present moment, but we're really interested in an experience, like experiencing the here and now. Really getting interested in the nature of our experience of the present moment. So it doesn't really require thoughts, except the thoughts that encourage us to be interested. And as we practice these next 6 weeks, let's remember that we're not trying to be aware of impermanence. It's better, more helpful to think, I'm waking up to the way it is. I want to be close, intimate, awake, exposed to the way it is. And when we end up telling ourselves a story about the way it is, or interpreting, conceiving of something, we just want to notice that the nature of that thinking process as part of the present moment, as a phenomena coming and going here and now. The content isn't really that important. So for a few more minutes, just sensing the river, the changing nature of our subjective, actual experience here. In many ways, it's more helpful to talk about it as experiencing instead of an experience. There's an experiencing happening. with no past behind and no future in front. There's just this take a little time, just aware of the stretching and the moving as you do that. Instead of thinking that I'm this guy, I'm this person, trying to have insight into the truth of impermanence, anicca, it might be more helpful, more interesting to just have the sense that there's this unfixed flow of conditioned causes and conditions, we say, doing its best to be a human being, right? It's like, that's actually more the miracle. Like we normally would frame it like, the miracle is I'm just this lowly human being, trying to open to the mystery, the truth of existence. But what's the real miracle is that nature, which is this unfixed flow of causes and conditions, how it's expressing itself as Mark or Gabe or, all these just, that's really the amazing thing. And even getting interested in ignorance, when we feel really congealed and self-centered and tight about something, right? Like to have, if there's just enough space, like, well, this is amazing. How real it seems, right? Because even on some level, we know it's just causes and conditions, yet it feels so real. Me as a suffering being, or me as someone who's better than, or worse than, or, whatever fixed stance the mind is enveloped in for moments at a time. Just how compelling that anger is, or how compelling that desire is. It's just amazing. And we know, just even on the intellectual level, we have a lot of confidence that, oh yeah, it's just nature, And when we watch somebody else, some of you know Win, my partner, is a choreographer and dancer, used to be a professional dancer back in the day. And so I've seen a lot of production, and it's easy when you're seeing a great musician or a great performer or a great athlete, oh yeah, that's nature, But right now, even all the sticky insecurities and other sort of more heavy emotional states, that's also nature, a flow, an activity with no center to it. And that's true for us as this strange hybrid community with people all around at home on Zoom and those of us here in the room. So in our practice, it just takes, the hard part isn't even the amount of concentration we need, like some superhuman amount of subtlety. The more difficult thing actually is finding a way to unhook from our preconceived ideas. And that's really the role of our study, the teachings from the Buddha, and the way we study is we're trying to skillfully, because there are a lot of ways to unskillfully use the teachings, right? Where we just can be part of, building up our sense of self, because I know this stuff. I'm an expert on the Buddhist teachings. But we're really using them as a counterweight to our habits of conceit, basically. Or, one of the expressions of conceit is this projection of permanence. So that's really the issue at hand. It's like, what can we do in 6 weeks that will help us illuminate this ongoing and mostly unseen projection of permanence in order to wake up to the way it's always been. We're not waking up to something new or different. We're just seeing, experiencing this minus the projection that, is almost always there because of how we've been conditioned through culture, through all the different conditioning forces. And the Buddha, the projection of permanence is it's a heavy load. It doesn't work. And so it has a particular, subjectively for each of us, however, in whatever ways our mind is dependent, addicted even to imagining, projecting a sense of permanence. This is really me in a permanent sense. This is really common ground in a permanent sense. This is truly, really Monday. In the United States of America, in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, all these sort of ways that we can solidify. And I'm somebody like this. So we want to skillfully use the teachings to loosen things up. And the perception of impermanence, it's like Sayadaw Tejaniya says, it's always surprising. Like we can really understand this intellectually, that things aren't fixed. There's nothing solid. But when that's experienced, even for just, as the Buddha says, the snap of a finger. Do you know this teaching? It's really a great one. The Buddha's just talking about things that are really impactful. Let's see if I can get my eyes on it. I'll read it more directly instead of paraphrasing it. Here it is. So the Buddha said, fruitful as the act of giving is, like being a generous person, yet it is still more fruitful to go with confident heart for refuge in the practice, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, but just really committing, emotionally committing to the path of practice. So generosity is great, but really committing to the practice is better. And then he says, and undertaking the 5 precepts with that. As fruitful as that is, it's still more fruitful to maintain loving kindness in your heart. So this is a real absorption. The mind's really just in the attitude of loving kindness, no ill will at all, for as long as it takes to milk a cow, the Buddha says. That's even better than going for refuge. And then he says, as fruitful as that is, to be really immersed in this immeasurable attitude, quality of mind of loving kindness, better to have the perception of impermanence with a snap of a finger. That length of time is more like what that sets in motion in our heart. Because it's like it can't, once that window or that perception opens up, the mind can't forget it. It's like the mind going forward, and it's like maybe for the purposes of this course, we'll call it the mind stream. How the mind unfolds going forward is forever changed by that perception. Just like all of us have had impactful moments of seeing something, and we're changed by seeing that. Maybe some of you gave birth, and it's like you're not the same person after having that experience. Or you've been with somebody who died, or in the dying process with someone, and then it's like everything changes after that. Well, this in a more profound way, when we see the changing nature, the unsatisfying nature, the impersonal nature, these three characteristics, when we see them experientially, not intellectually, it really changes us going forward. And it isn't like we're trying to be changed. It's just the change cannot not happen. And it's always surprising how impactful it is. Somebody once asked the Buddha, "Why do your monks look so serene and radiant?" And the Buddha replied, "They do not lament the past nor crave the future, but maintain themselves in whatever comes. Therefore they are serene." And in a similar way, Sharon Salzberg, in her wonderful book on loving kindness, titled Loving Kindness, wrote, "Equanimity is spacious stillness of the mind, a radiant calm that allows us to be present fully with all the changing experiences that constitute our world and our lives." And this simple image of something, some wisdom that isn't in conflict with change, with the fluid, unfixed nature of things, is a useful description or image for awakening. Right? There is this fluidity, this movement that is our lives. And wisdom can either, like imagine that I have to find, you can just see the tension, like I need to find something solid for me. And whether it's a relationship, okay, my relationship is nailed down, trustworthy, or my health nailed down, or my routines, I get up at this time, I eat oatmeal for breakfast, I got that, lock that down. I go to Kamagon Meditation Center, I'll lock that down. I'm a Buddhist, that identity, okay, I got that. But all that does is make us vulnerable, right? So whenever we put a stake in the ground, then we're counting on something that's not in line with reality, with the changing, ephemeral, insubstantial nature of things. So no wonder there's this predominance of anxiety, uneasiness, because we're looking for safety, we're looking for the psychic safety, existential safety, in a way that's opposed to the way it is. And it isn't, the problem we face isn't that everything is impermanent. The problem is there's a sense of a me that thinks it needs permanence in a world that's not permanent. So it's a setup. It's a setup. So anxiety is the natural thing to arise in that setup. Fear, anxiety, and then that gets expressed like this over attachment and dependence on pleasantness, because we're so uneasy, right? The only thing that gives us a little modicum of space, a little taste of freedom, is having a nice experience, right? Because we're on the shaky ground, because we're looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for safety in places we can never find it. I don't know if people read this book by Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield way back when, one of their earlier books, Seeking the Heart of Wisdom. I think they alternated which chapter they wrote. So I think this chapter was written by Jack Kornfield on the three characteristics, but he wrote there, sometimes the deepening experience of the three characteristics becomes confusing. We may have practiced for a number of years and become a bit more calm and balanced as a result of it. But in the back of our minds, we think of how our practice should develop further. After all this time, shouldn't we be experiencing more of the factors of enlightenment? We expect more bliss or stillness or profound clarity, more ease and joy. Yet, what do we actually see? More impermanence, more emptiness, more unsatisfactoriness and suffering. We see it, we feel it more clearly, and we think something is wrong with our practice. Practice is the deepening realization of these basic truths. Each of them is a gate to liberation, a gate to freedom. If we can understand and fully accept it, at the very deepest level of meditation, a moment of full acceptance at one of these gates, a full letting go, brings us to what is beyond it, the unconditioned nibbana. And that's a good way to see this course is, like the three characteristics, and impermanence is the first, and then Shelley will teach on dukkha in the spring, and then I'll teach on anatta, the impersonal nature, in the summer. So for the next, whatever that is, 9 months or so, we'll be looking at the three characteristics. And you can think of them as sort of the most potent, but also disturbing medicine in our Dharma medicine chest, right? And the whole process, as you know, you've heard it so many times and through so many different teachers' voices, the whole process is aligning with the way it is. But there's some sparks, because as our heart, our conditioned mind and heart, and the heart that practices, as it does its best to align, it's like the habit energies, the conditioned habits of our mind, don't line up with the reality of our present moment. So there's sparks. There's resistance, there's fear, there's boredom, right? It's hard. It's hard to do the practice. To really basically let the moment have its effect. And the moment is having its effect on all the wrong ideas that have been conditioned into our mind. We don't have to worry about all the wrong ideas making a mess of nature. It won't work that way, right? But we need to let nature in, like we have to like really take a bath in nature, really soak, really let it have its effect. Not just when we're sitting, just any time will do. That's a way to, I find this helpful, I don't know if you will, but just to reconfigure how I see myself as a bundles of, unhelpful views, ways of understanding, and then ways of acting that come out of those wrong understandings, right? Fighting against nature, like opposing the way it is. And it takes so much psychic energy to protect my wrong ideas. We think it's the other way around, like, why isn't nature really having its effect? Why isn't the truth of impermanence somehow penetrating? But our whole practice is like learning how to drop the defenses, learning how to let nature be our teacher. Let the nature of the present moment is just waiting to correct what is out of balance, what is out of alignment. But we're constantly defending it. That's why that simile, the 40 cartloads of fuel, where the Buddha asked his students, so you got a big bonfire and you periodically dump a bunch of fuel, 40 cartloads in fact, what's going to happen? And the students go, well, that bonfire is going to burn for a long, long time. What happens if you don't defend, if you don't project permanence? Well, that fire, those fires of wrong understanding are going to go out. They will cease. Awakening will happen. So awakening is really the cessation, like allowing that neurotic activity of projecting permanence to cease. But you and I can't do it directly because you and we are those wrong ideas. So our attempt to do it, like to align with the truth, will always be some way of projecting permanence. So what we can do, though, is we can relax and we can get interested in the present moment. But we can't try to get right, try to get wise. It doesn't work that way. This is from the Buddha. Whether awakened ones appear or not, there remains this element, this structure of things, this certainty in things. All formations are impermanent. All formations are unsatisfactory. All things are not self. And these three characteristics that we'll be covering over the next 9 months, they're not different things. Like dukkha is not different than anicca, and anicca is not different than anatta, the impersonal nature. Right? They're just different perspectives on this, on Dhamma, or the nature of things, the way it is. We look at the present moment one way and we see anicca, the changing nature. We look at the same thing from a different angle, let's say, and we see the unsatisfactory nature. Like when things are inconstant, undependable, well, they're not going to be able to satisfy the sense of me as an ego, because I'm looking for something solid that I can count on. So things that are inconstant don't satisfy. And when things are fluid, I mean, this is one of the Buddha's early discourses. He basically went through this. When things are inconstant, they're not satisfying. And then he asks the people there, the students, I guess, there, is it appropriate to consider that I, me, or mine? Things that are changing and unsatisfactory, not capable of satisfying. This is from the Visuddhimagga, which is ancient text from the 3rd century. It's quite important in the early Buddhist countries like Burma and Thailand and Sri Lanka, this text called the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification. And in there it says, impermanence of things is the rising, passing, and changing of things, or the disappearance of things that have become or arisen. The meaning is that these things never persist in the same way, but that they are vanishing, dissolving from moment to moment. And we can observe this directly. I try to point us in this direction during the guided sit, but like if a thought arises, it's useful, instead of thinking you need a Dharma move to make the thinking go away, just get interested. Will this thought cease on its own? Or there's some, like during the sit, I was just noticing the tongue at the roof of the mouth. Because there are some sensations, it's like when Mark says, well, things are changing, and they go, yeah, what about that sensation? That seems pretty constant. And to kind of look at sensation. And it's just amazing, like if you're really honest with yourself, I mean, not only is that experience of the tongue touching the roof of the mouth, like it's like little, when you get really interested in the attention, the way of paying attention is really stable and not projecting anything. It's just like a little dance of things happening. But the thing that makes it so ephemeral is, it's like you're there, and then, 10 seconds later, the mind is somewhere completely like in a different universe. And then it's just like the mind will lie to itself, yeah, but that's still there. As if that whole like complete flip of reality wasn't a perfect demonstration of the ephemeral changing nature, right? And even when we come back, it's almost like you catch the mind, it wants to impose continuity, like, oh, I'm feeling the tongue at the roof of the mouth, and that's just where it was before I did that little adventure to whatever I was thinking about for 2 minutes or whatever, right? It's like we tell ourselves a story that, oh yeah, that's the same touching sensation, that's exactly it. But is it? It's kind of like you go home tonight, or those of you who are home, you shut your computers off eventually, and you walk into the kitchen or whatever, oh yeah, this is my kitchen. Well, that idea imposes a continuity, but it's not really the same. And you can sense that too. Like how we're massaging things into this idea of permanence. Things are fixed. One of the articles that you'll get a link to in tomorrow's email is this one by Thich Nhat Hanh. Oh, what is it called now? But basically it's, hooray for impermanence, because it makes everything possible. It's not quite that way, but it's almost that. This is a little excerpt. We may be tempted to say that because things are impermanent, there is suffering. But the Buddha encouraged us to look again. Without impermanence, life is not possible. How can we transform our suffering if things are not impermanent? How can a child grow up to be a beautiful adult How can the situation in the world improve? We need impermanence for social justice and for hope. If you suffer, it's not because things are impermanent, it's because you believe things are permanent. When a flower dies, you don't suffer much because you understand that flowers are impermanent, but you cannot accept the impermanence of your beloved one, and you suffer deeply when they pass away. If you look deeply into impermanence, you will do your best. You will do your best to make them happy right now. Awareness of impermanence, you become positive. Aware of impermanence, you become positive, loving, and wise. Impermanence is good news. Without impermanence, nothing would be possible. With impermanence, every door is open for change. Impermanence is an instrument for our liberation. Sharon Salzberg, in another one of her great books, The Heart as Wide as the World, tells a story of a good friend. Sharon's lived mostly in IMS in the middle of Massachusetts, a really beautiful part of the state. And they have nice falls there, the classic New England fall. And a friend from California was going to come out and visit right around the peak color time. And Sharon just caught herself over and over again as the leaves got closer and closer to their full, red and deep browns and all the nice colors, golds. And just like really wanting the leaves to hold out, until the friend got there so they could see it. Because you know how it is. We want our friends to be happy and want to share nice things with our friends. And as it turns out, the person couldn't come. And then Sharon noticed her mind going, this is how deluded we are. Like, oh, okay, it's okay for you now to go, brown and fall out of the trees and not be so special anymore, right? It's like, oh, slow down, or hurry up, it's fine. Yeah, and it's just all the sort of ways that we want to negotiate or manipulate what is unreliable and unfixed and uncertain and impermanent and ungovernable, life. Our own mind. Have you noticed? This is from Thanissaro Bhikkhu. I have the link for this article too. It's called All About Change, so you can read this. And there are going to be lots of articles. Some of you might have lots of time and want to dig in. And don't feel like, oh, I got to figure out what article is the right article to read. I kind of put a lot there. There's a certain, I don't know, it sounds a little magical, but, snoop around and just see which ones you're attracted to reading. That's what I would do. So anyway, in this article, All About Change, this is a Western Buddhist monk, abbot of a monastery outside of San Diego, did his training in Thailand, in the Thai forest tradition. He writes, this insight that all experience is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self forms the basis of the three characteristics that the Buddha taught for inducing a sense of dispassion for normal time and space-bound experience. Anicca, the first of the three, is pivotal. Anicca applies to everything that changes. Often translated as impermanent, it's actually the negative of nicca, which means constant or dependable. So not constant, not dependable is a more accurate translation. Everything that changes is inconstant. And then a little later he writes, if something is anicca, then the other two characteristics automatically follow. It's dukkha, or stressful, and anatta, not self, not worthy to be claimed as me or mine. If you're seeking a dependable basis for long-term happiness and ease, anything inconstant is obviously a stressful place to pin your hopes, like trying to relax in an unstable chair whose legs are liable to break at any time. And it's just interesting in those places in our lives, like it might have been a relationship, it might have been a job, it might have been, like I notice, I need to, just for my own health and for all kinds of reasons, like get back into shape. But then when I start to do that, then you get aches and pains. Like I used to run a lot when I was younger, and so I've got this sort of knee that starts to hurt if I use it. And other things like that. And so it's just like, doesn't work. Life doesn't work. And this unreliable, not dependable, it's just really built into so many things. Like technology is a really good example of that. Or today I had to fix one of our toilets at our house, and it's just the normal innards of a toilet. It's not that complicated to do. But it's just like one thing after another, like I couldn't shut the water off. It like most of the time was figuring out how am I going to shut the water off, because it hadn't been shut off in so long, and minerals get deposited in the thing, and do I have a wrench that will help me do it? And I'm not that strong. And then same thing, but there's just all these little seemingly easy things. This is after watching a video that the guy says, I can show you how to do this in 30 seconds, he said. I think I did it in 40 minutes. Something like that. But it's just these so many examples of how this is, how relationships don't work, how one thing after another. And what's the problem? That life is the way that it is, or that there was the expectation that things would be dependable, reliable, sort of fit our idea of them. And just imagine if we align more with the truth of that it's inconstant, not dependable. If we really aligned with that when we went to work in the morning, or hung out with a friend, or did projects around the house, how would that be different? How would the heart be different? If that was the expectation, that things are unreliable, not dependable, inconstant, uncertain, and just sort of move through life with that attitude in mind. It might be a different world we live in. And, as we go through the spring and the summer, looking at they're sometimes called marks of existence, 3 characteristics, marks of existence, universal qualities, anicca, dukkha, anatta, because they're not really about different things, but just different ways of understanding this, the way it is, Dhamma, then like I think Ajahn Thanisara's article says, they're considered like gateways to liberation, a way to take medicine, a way to let reality in a way that disturbs our ignorance, interrupts our ignorance, right? We need to get close. That's sort of the awakening process, is one way or another we have to figure out how to get close to reality, so reality interrupts ignorance, removes ignorance. Because ignorance can only persist when it's in its own little bubble, its own little vortex, self-reinforcing vortex. This is true with other, unwholesome patterns. If we hang out with other people who have that same unwholesome pattern, it can persist a lot longer. But if we remove ourselves, then we're affected by, who are around the environment we're in. It's another discourse from the Buddha. The uninformed person might become disenchanted with, disengaged from, and become free from this body made of the four great elements. Why is that? Because the piling up, the wearing down, the taking up, the laying aside of this material body is evident. Yet that which is called mind, that one would become disenchanted with, would not disengage from, would not become free of. Why is that? Because for a very long time, one has been attached to, identified, and grasped onto that, the mind. This is mine, this is who I am, this is myself. And then the Buddha says, it would be better for the uninformed person to approach this body as self rather than the mind. Why is that? Because the body endures for a year, 2 years, even up to 100 years or more, while that which is called the mind arises one way and ceases in another, day and night. Just as a monkey making its way through the forest or jungle grasps a branch, releasing it, it grasps another, so also that which is called mind arises in one way and ceases in another, day and night. Here, the informed follower of the path gives careful and thorough attention to the interdependent origination of phenomena. This being present, that occurs. From the arising of this, that arises. This being absent, that does not occur. From the cessation of this, that ceases. Seen in this way, the informed follower on the path becomes disenchanted disenchanted with the mind and the body. Disenchanted, one disengages. Disengaged, one is free. In freedom, the knowledge occurs, I am free. And so this is this important part of the path, that I was trying to talk about, how we're letting the medicine in. We're letting the way it is, Dhamma, the changing nature in this case, we're letting it in, and it's having its effect on the mind, on the heart. It's interrupting wrong view. And so, like in terms of practice, it's useful not to, just instead of spending a lot of time in our meditation and daily life trying to smooth things out, sometimes just go right for the exposure and let it have its effect. Like, what's the effect? This kind of talks to that point. Immeasurable is this onflow. The earliest point cannot be known. As beings obscured by ignorance, tied to craving, keep running on, keep flowing on. For a very long time indeed have you all encountered suffering, confusion, misery, and swelled the charnel grounds. It has surely been long enough to become disenchanted, long enough to become disengaged, long enough to become free from all formations. Formations are so impermanent. Formations are so unstable. Formations are so disappointing. The Buddha then uttered this verse, how impermanent formations are, their natures to come and go. Having arisen, they vanish. Happiness comes from calming them. There's a chant we'll do some nights during the course That is a sort of a traditional chant, especially at Buddhist funerals. Nicca vata sankara uparawa yedamano upajitva nirushanti te sang upasamo sukho. All conditioned things arise and pass away. Understanding this deeply leads to the greatest happiness, which is peace. So this is something we can actually check out in these weeks ahead. All things arise and pass away. Understanding this deeply, really coming into alignment with this, leads to the deepest happiness, which is peace. So is that actually true? And how might each of us go about checking on that? You know, we sit down, we got our favorite snack after you get home, and watching whatever you do, or reading your favorite book, or whatever you're going to do, having a nice conversation with someone you live with. But just having that all conditioned things arise and pass away. So like in this context of having a sweet moment, you know, just seeing that truth, being aware of that truth, even as you're having your sweet moment, does it lead to peace? Or same thing if you have a difficult, you go home and the dog had an accident, on your carpet, your new couch or something like that, and just like understand, oh yeah, all conditioned things arise and pass away. Sometimes it's a mess, sometimes it's beautiful. Really be in alignment with this, really accepting this deeply, how uncertain and inconstant and not dependable things are, leads to the greatest happiness, which is peace, where we're not living in a way that's opposed to the underlying truth of anicca. Because anicca, it's not just that things are impermanent, but remember this other side or related, that it's not dependable. Like Joseph Goldstein, one of my teachers, says, anything can happen anytime. Like to really live with that. And the effect would be that as you move through your life, you're not surprised by anything. Good stuff happens, you're not surprised. Terrible stuff happens, you're not surprised. Oh yeah, this is how it is. Things are unsure. That's what the Buddha's been telling me, This is a perfect example. Things are unsure. Some people were shocked by the election, But even if, you did your research and you had good evidence that you thought it was going to be one way and then it was another way, but it's just like the mind wanting that things to be dependable. So what kind of heart, what kind of understanding is okay with things being not dependable? So you see how the alignment works. The more we align, for example, with the truth of impermanence, the more we're revealing the understanding that doesn't have a problem with things being not dependable, uncertain, changeable. Right? So how do we, we want to get right understanding, we want wisdom. But the arising of wisdom, it doesn't arise because we want to be wise. Real wisdom requires being in alignment with the way it is. That's what will reveal the wisdom. Because that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is that understanding that doesn't have a problem with reality. That's wisdom. So if you want wisdom, keep placing yourself in an intimate relationship with reality, an unfiltered reality, and then wisdom, only wisdom can do that. You'll have wisdom. Suzuki Roshi, some of you know, the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center, really important teacher here in bringing Buddhism to the West in the last half century, wrote, "Finding composure with impermanence is our practice, is enlightenment." Then for him, the faultless, this is the Buddha speaking, then for him the faultless, immaculate eye of Dhamma arose. Right? And this is how the Buddha talks often about the insight. Whatever is the nature to arise, all that is of the nature to cease. And one saw the Dhamma, attained the Dhamma, understood the Dhamma, penetrated the Dhamma. One crossed over all doubts, dispersed all confusion, achieved self-confidence, and no longer dependent upon others in the Buddhist teachings. Right? And so the way that insight is described again is whatever is the nature to arise, all that is of the nature to cease. It seems so simple, but that's not, like if a problem arises for us, we don't have that sense, oh yeah, this problem will cease. Or if something really beautiful arises, oh yeah, this will go away. Like that we chanted at the beginning, all that is mine, beloved and pleasing will become otherwise. I mean, that's such a great thing. You put on your favorite pair of pants tomorrow morning, all that is mine, beloved, pleasing will become otherwise. I noticed when I was in the bathroom how many stains these pair of pants have. I normally try to look decent when I come to teach, but it was too cold to want to take them off. A couple more things. I'll just end with a teaching from Sharon. I read a little bit from this. This is, I mentioned, from her book, A Heart as Wide as the World. And she just gives an example of the practice, because it really depends on, I mean, it really is going to be expressed as moments in your practice where you're seeing the arising of experience. It's almost like the present moment, the conditions burst forth. And there's a usually pleasant brightness in those moments where just things are, you hear a sound of a bird and it just seems so real and fresh, and you see the face of a friend, and and there's this and that, and it's just like bursting forth, one thing after another. And that's half of the practice. So Sharon writes, the practice of meditation makes us especially sensitive to how our perceptions themselves are constantly changing. There's a thought, and then it's gone. A sound arises and passes away. Smells, tastes, touches, and touch sensations come and go. Sights come into existence and vanish. Any moment of our lives can be seen, in Ralph Waldo Emerson's words, as the volcanic present. Through meditation, we come to know not just poetically, but actually that we are dying and being reborn in every moment. Sometimes in meditation practice, the mind naturally alights on the aspect of being reborn in every moment. It is very beautiful. We notice the beginnings of things, the arising of objects, whether a sound or a feeling in the body or an emotion, or most noteworthy aspect to us is its coming into being. And we are experiencing the world and ourselves emerging, renewing, beginning again, and it is glorious. We are witnessing the magic that life is life arising. Sometimes it is quite different. And we experience the truth of impermanence. When we experience the truth of impermanence, the mind naturally alights on all the endings of things, the moment-to-moment passing away. That is the other face of change. We notice the dissolution of everything we experience. We become aware of the passing of everything that we hold dear, everything that we have tried to preserve and prolong. We turn to look at something and it vanishes. We start responding to a feeling then we notice it has already gone. Everything is so fragile, so effervescent, here and yet fleeting, revealing the seeds of its death, right at the heart of its birth. Where is anything that we can hold on to? As Kalo Rinpoche said, life's breath is like a water bubble. Even though seeing the arising nature of things is wondrous, and seeing the fleeting nature of things can be very disconcerting, both are essential. Opening to both aspects of change help us to see the truth of how things are. Whether we like changing seasons or not, we learn to trust them, to sense the rightness of the cycles, understanding the truth of change in our own lives. We can live with that same sense of trust and rightness. So I look forward to hearing from you next week. Yeah, just your own learning as you open to the truth of change. And again, it's more about being intimate than trying to see impermanence. So just watch out for that, like trying to impose the truth of impermanence. You can just observe how that thought itself arose, and then it will cease, and your mind will be on to something else. And how many births and deaths have there been today for each of us? You know, we had this little pattern, that's who I was for a while, and then there was that pattern, and then this, and then that. And the class started, and now it's over, and on and on. One thing that people might be interested in, Meg Brandelin is going to be teaching this weekend. Meg is a longtime community member and leader and someone who's taught here off and on for many years. And Meg is also a palliative care doctor down at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So Friday night, Meg's giving a more personal Dharma talk on her own understanding and experience of working with death, both as a palliative care doctor and just personally in her life. And then on Saturday, Meg and I are going to teach a workshop that explores some of the Buddhist teachings on death and dying and how useful they can be. So it fits quite well with this course. That's 9:30 to 4. And then on Sunday afternoon, Meg's giving a more practical workshop on preparing for death and dying. Everything from, your medical, what is it called? Medical directive, thanks. To other just kind of understanding, like, what is the dying process like and how can we not be surprised? How can we prepare so we're not surprised when it happens to our loved ones, happens to ourselves? So you might be interested in any of those three programs. Take a look online on the calendar where we have all our up-to-date program information. The following Saturday, the 25th of January, I'm going to be leading a retreat with Madhuri Shores and Jen Racho on the Buddhist teachings on spiritual friendship. It's called like Sutta Study, Understanding the Buddhist Teachings on Spiritual Friendship. And that's also 9:30 to 4, Saturday the 25th. So join in for that. And retreats coming up and practice periods out at the retreat center, many other things. So just get on the weekly email list if you're not, or check on our calendar for upcoming programs. Have a good week of practice, everyone. Please, if you haven't registered, make sure you register so that you get the emails with all the resources for the course. See you next Monday.
Thank you.
Good night to all of you online.